My name is Ashley. My story here begins when I was 18 years old. I was sitting in the parking lot of a local news station, which shall remain unnamed. And I was sitting in the parking lot with my mom, and we had just pitched the idea of a local cooking show on a station here locally. They gently declined us. They gently told us we weren't the right people, we didn't have the right look, we did not have the right format, and it just was not the right time. And so I was a little bit disappointed. I was sitting there with my mom, and she turned and looked at me in the car and she said, "Ashley, I'm so glad that you came here with me today." And I was like, "Really?" I didn't even really say anything in the meeting. And she was like, "Yeah." And she looked at me and she said, "When I'm with you, when I work with you, I feel more brave. I feel more brave." And so that 35-minute ride back home, I thought about that the entire drive home. See, what you may not know about my story is that when I was 6 years old, my dad was diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer. He rolled back into an operation room. They took out a tumor the size of my fist, and the tentacles still remained. So we underwent chemotherapy, he underwent radiation, and the cancer was still there. Within a very short period of time, my family learned about a treatment called anti-neoplastons. You don't ever need to remember that. There's a scientist out in Texas who was doing experimental cancer treatments. His name was Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski. And he had a 90% success rate amongst people who had the tumor, much like my dad did. So my family took the risk. Every 3 months we'd drive back and forth to Texas and my dad would take these treatments. It literally took the tentacles away, so he was cancer-free. Within a few months of my dad starting those treatments, we were contacted on behalf of the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration. Almost just said something completely different. The FDA, and we were contacted by Dr. Brzezinski's lawyers and said, "Look, what he's doing is under investigation. It's illegal to take experimental treatments, even though it's helping you, even though it took your cancer away. It's illegal. It's a federal offense." And so we were wondering if you would fight on behalf of Dr. Brzezinski with other families. So again, my family took the risk. We fought the FDA, we won our case, and now you can take experimental treatments across state lines. And so within a few months of that, my mom had to stop working. The treatments were nearly $4,000 a month. And that was more than my dad even made before he was on disability, right? So my mom stopped homeschooling us. My sister and I went to public school. And at that time, she was stacking recipes on the top of our fridge every day. It was just kind of like a hobby before Pinterest existed. I think Pinterest started in our home, actually. And she would just stack recipes, healthy recipes on there, low-fat, low-carb recipes. She'd stack them up there. And someone said, "You know what, I think it'd be a great idea if you started selling your recipes. Why don't you put together a little cookbook and sell your cookbook?" So she thought, I don't know how to type. We don't even own a computer. I've never published anything in my life. Sure, let's do it. So she ordered 100 cookbooks, published them herself, sold out in the first day. Then she ordered a couple hundred. Then she ordered a few hundred, then she ordered a few thousand. And over the span of the next 12 years of my life, my mom would be a #1 cookbook selling author. She sold over 1 million copies. She authored 7 cookbooks and an autobiography and was on a national channel for a cooking show. So now you see why that next 35-minute drive home that day from the news station, I was thinking, I make you brave? See, my parents my entire life had groomed me to take risks. They didn't even do it on purpose. It was just life or death. That's just all I ever knew. And so I was really, really comfortable in other people taking risks. And I was usually the first person on the sideline saying, "Go team, you can do it. Take a risk, you can do it." But when it came to my own life, I was usually really afraid. And I always wanted to play it the safe route. In high school, I did not try out for one thing I wasn't certain I would make. And so I missed out on a lot of opportunities in my life. And so that day when I was 18, driving home, that 35-minute ride home, I was determined that that wasn't going to be me anymore. That if I could make other people feel brave, that I just wanted to be brave, right? You hear me? Nod your head if you can hear me, all right? I just wanted to be that person. And so over the next 10 years of my life, what I'm going to uncover for you today is kind of just the system that I put myself through in order to feel comfortable in taking a risk. Now, I love this room today because I see so many failures here. Like so many expert failures. How many of you guys love failing? No, put your hand down. Nobody loves failing. I hope that by the end of today, you can raise your hand and say, "I want to fail so good," right? I actually put it on my agenda every month when I fill out a board report for my boss. I fill out, this is how I failed. All right, so, and at the end of this, I have these little printouts of just kind of these questions that I kind of put myself through. So really simple. Everybody close your eyes for a quick second. I want you to think of something you have always wanted to do in your life but you haven't done yet. Maybe it's start a business. Maybe it's to advocate for a charity you've always wanted to. Maybe it's to write a huge check to a charity. Maybe it's to go skydiving. Whatever it is, nod your head if you got that figured out. What's something you've always dreamed of doing? All right, open your eyes. Someone share with me your idea. What's something you've always wanted to do? Yes?
Write a whole album by myself. No other musicians help.
Fantastic. What else? Yes?
Improve my public speaking, because English is my second language. I'm not going to have hard time.
Fantastic. Yes. What else? Nobody else wants to take a risk. What is it?
Write a book.
Write a book. Okay, I love that. You're in good company today. One more. What's something you've always wanted to do?
Play guitar and sing in front of people.
Okay, I love that.
I don't know how to play guitar.
You're going to find out, right?
That's my plan.
All right. So today when I talk about falling in love with failure, what we're really talking about is being comfortable in taking a risk. So the first thing you need to know, we're going to talk about 4 no's today, 4 knowledges that you need to understand in order to be comfortable in taking risks. The first no is know your why. Know your why. When you know your why, it's the fuel to your fire. Everybody say, know your why. You have to know your why. You need to know why your butt is in this seat right now. You need to know why you show up to the place that you call work every day. You need to know your why, because that is the fuel to your fire. I worked at Cherry Street Mission for nearly 9 years, a place that is great for me because I'm comfortable in taking risk. In staff orientation, all new staff had to come through an orientation with me. The first thing I taught them was, you need to know your why. Why are you here? Because let me tell you something, when you show up to work every day looking at people who are living in cycles of poverty, you are working amongst murderers, rapists, ex-offenders, people who have failed our city, a paycheck is not enough to get you through. And so if your why is ever fame or money, fame and money do not float. They will not keep you afloat. They will not keep you afloat. So some of my questions for knowing your why is, why do I really want to do this? Am I doing this in hopes to be recognized? Am I doing this to become rich? What are my core values? Oh my gosh, you guys, I have failed good so many times because things did not line up with my core values, and it's not enough to keep me afloat. What will the future hold if I don't take this risk? And then my favorite question, will I have more regret if I don't succeed in this risk or if I just don't take it at all? Right? The number one question I ask someone when they're about to take a risk is, if we sit here in a year from now and you didn't do this, would that be worse than just doing it and failing? Every single time they usually say, yes, that would be worse than just taking the risk. So then I say, hold my hand, let's jump, right? So the first thing is what? Know your why. The second thing is know your what. See, there was a professor at a prestige art school. He had 100 students in his class. And he said, today, what I want you to do is take this class, 2 hours. I want you to go out and I want you to create something. Create anything, create something. 2 hours came by, the professor's still waiting in his classroom. 90 of the 100 students come back in empty-handed, had not created anything. This was an art school. Like this was a school of people filled like y'all, like creatives, right? Like you guys talk about coding, I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Code what? And so these were creatives, people that love to create. But the professor found that of those 90 students, they didn't understand their canvas. And so it became so overwhelming. They didn't know if their canvas was, a wall for graffiti or if it was clay, if it was wood. They needed a starting point. And so you need to know your what. Sometimes our risk sounds like this really fantastic idea, but it's so overwhelming that we don't know where to get started. And so the first thing I do when I'm taking a risk is I start to define my canvas. And so some of those questions are, who does this risk involve? Do I have the right people around me? What kind of financial risk is at stake? What does failure look like to me? What does success look like to me? When is the best time to take this risk? So key, right? Sometimes we've taken risks, a really great risk, at the really wrong time because we didn't define our canvas well enough. Who will cheer for me? What is the best possible outcome? What is the worst possible outcome? If I don't succeed, will I be okay? Right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't take the risk, but if I don't succeed, will I be okay? All right, so first thing was what? Know your what? Know your why. Second thing, know your what. Third thing, know your limits. Know your limits. Oh, guys, this is so important. We all know people who didn't know their limits and took a risk that wrecked their life. See, my husband and I decided 3 years ago to start investing into real estate. I don't know if you know a whole lot about real estate in this community, but it was not a good time to be investing into real estate. We had $180.37 left into our checking account, and we're sitting across from the dining room table from each other, and we said, no matter what, this, me and you, talking to each other, our marriage, this is off limits, baby. Me and you, we're for forever. So if this real estate thing doesn't work, this goes nowhere. If it starts to involve this is off limits. And so you need to know your limits. How much money are you willing to invest? I've been on the bad end of some bad risks where relationships went bad because when it came to exposable things, I was an exposable person. And I was never intended to be exposable. You hear what I'm saying? And so we need to know our why, we need to know our what, we need to know our limits. So some of those questions to know your limits. How much time am I willing to spend? How much money am I willing to invest? How often will I evaluate my risk? What am I not willing to sacrifice? That's a key question. What am I not willing to sacrifice? We would be lying if we would say we have parents in this room who have raised us who made sacrifices, missed games, missed meal times, missed bedtimes, right? We all have our different limits. You need to define that before you take a risk. That is the number one thing that makes me comfortable in taking a risk. I'm like, babe, I am all in, but you got to know this is not part of that. And then the second part of that knowing your limits is assessing. We know people who have taken risk after risk after risk after risk, but they never assessed it. I asked Nate last week, I said, I love what Nate is doing with Code City. My question to him last week was, how long you got this in, how long do you have this in for you? How long you got enough, oomph in your game to keep this going? Because this can be exhausting, even if it's your biggest passion. What do you have left? How long? What's your time limit? That was my question to him, right? And so it's important that we always make a timeline to assess. And so just like that real estate investment, my husband and I said, for us, it usually tends to be about a year. I can go hard for a year, right? 5 years, that's a different story. 10 years, that's a different story. But it's unfair to ourselves and unfair to others to not know your limits. So assess yourself. I started a company when I was 20 years old. I got laid off from my job. I was working outside of what I went to school for, and so I thought, man, I don't know what I'm going to do now. And so I started a business called Shaffer and Company. I started doing wedding consulting and planning, and it was going really, really well. And right around that 1-year turning point, I started to assess it, and I said, this could really be something. Like, I could really make some money. I booked 14 weddings in 3 months. I thought this could be a good gig. But I went back to my whats and my questions, and you know what I realized? This could be a great turning point for this business, but I didn't like giving up my nights and weekends. And so you know what I decided? Shaffer and Company was gone, right? My friendships were more important to me. My family relationships were more important to me. I knew I was going to be starting a family soon. And so some of those time slots were off limits. So was it a great risk? Absolutely, it was a great risk. But assessing is key. And then the fourth thing, and if you could hear anything tonight, I want you to know this. Know that you are not failing, you are finding. See, that's what made me comfortable. That's what made me fall in love with failure, is I just stopped believing that I was failing. I haven't failed in 4 years. Not because I really haven't failed, but because I just started finding. Just like that day when I evaluated Shaffer and Company, I found that I valued my nights and weekends. right? That year of real estate investing with my husband on that 1 year mark, we found out it was a really good idea and we can do it again, right? And so when you know your why, when you know your what, when you know your limits, you need to know that you are not failing, you're finding. Say, you're not failing. All right, like say it like you even believe it a little. You're not failing. You're finding. I'm not going to fail. I'm going to find. All right, like say it like you mean it. I'm not going to fail. I'm only going to find. And so that has kind of been my safety. You're like, okay, just get to the chocolate chip cookies. There was a woman by the name of Ruth Graves Wakefield. She owned the Toll House Inn. And one day, she was known for her baked goods. One day, she had unexpected guests come to the inn, and she was known for her chocolate cookies. And on that day, she ran out of baker's chocolate. Travesty. Like utter, can you imagine running out of chocolate at a bakery? And so she thought, no problem. I'm going to improvise. I'm going to cut up this chunk of chocolate. I'm going to mix it in the batter. The chocolate will disperse and create chocolate cookies, much like baker's chocolate does. Much to her dismay, she opened up the oven, and what did she find? She found a failure, right? No! She found one of America's best-known cookies. Okay, so don't be afraid of taking that risk. Whatever it is that you had in your mind when we got started tonight, don't be afraid of that. Know your why. Know your what. Okay? Know your limits. Know that you're not failing. You're what? You're finding. And I just want to leave you with this before I open up for questions. We all happen to dream. Everybody in this place thought about a dream, right? But there's only a few of us that will make dreams happen. And the difference between the one and the other is those who are willing to take risks and those who have fallen in love with failure.